The apartment smells like stale champagne and the ghost of a chocolate cake. Glitter is stuck to the hardwood floor like tiny, mocking stars, catching the grim morning light. Above the couch, a banner, sagging pathetically in the middle, still proclaims, "Happy birthday, my love," to an empty room. My room, I guess. It's just mine now, and the silence is deafening. My thumb hovers over her contact picture, that stupid, beautiful one of her squinting into the sun on our trip to the coast. I press call for what feels like the 100th time since sunrise. Straight to voicemail. Her voice, recorded and cheerful, is a special kind of torture. "You've reached Amara, leave a message." I hang up before the beep, my throat tight. I switch to our message thread. The screen is a monument to my own idiocy. The last thing I sent, a pathetic, type-riddled plea from 3 a.m., sits there unanswered. "PLS Amara, answer me. It was just a joke, I didn't mean it." The single gray checkmark beside it is a digital tombstone. Blocked, I'm blocked on everything. How does this happen? How does one stupid story, one cheap laugh, detonate a 4-year relationship? It was a joke. It was supposed to be funny. Everyone was laughing. Now the only sound is the hum of the refrigerator, and it feels like it's laughing at me too. We were a cliché, in a way. The outgoing, life-of-the-party girl and the quiet, introspective one. I was the one who collected friends, who organized the brunches, who always had a wild story ready. Amara was the one who made our apartment a home. She was the calm center to my chaotic orbit, the one who'd listen to my frantic retellings of the night with a small, knowing smile, grounding me with a simple question like, "But did you have fun?" My friends loved her, but they were my friends. A loud, sharp-witted crew who communicated primarily through a currency of sarcastic jabs and brutal, hilarious roasts. It was an ecosystem I thrived in, but I always felt a low-grade pressure to perform, to deliver the funniest takedown, the most shocking anecdote. I had to earn my place at the table, again and again, with my wit. Amara would just sit there, nursing a glass of wine, observing with an amused detachment that I both admired and, if I'm being honest, sometimes resented. She never needed the spotlight. I was addicted to it. The warning signs were there. God, they were practically billboards. About 6 months ago, we were curled up on the couch, watching some dumb 80s high school movie. There was a scene where the nerdy kid gets on stage at the talent show, and his bully reveals a humiliating childhood photo of him in a weird superhero costume. The whole auditorium erupts in laughter. I chuckled along with it, but then I noticed Amara had gone completely still beside me. Her hand, which had been resting on my leg, was now a tight fist. She grabbed the remote and paused the movie. The screen froze on the kid's horrified face. "What's wrong?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "When I was in elementary school," she said, her voice quiet and steady, "I had a really bad lisp. I couldn't pronounce my S's. Kids called me Ammer, the th snake. They'd hiss at me in the hallways." She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of that little girl's pain in her eyes. One day, my teacher, trying to be encouraging, made me read a poem in front of the class. A poem full of S-words. I froze. I just stood there, bright red, while the other kids started hissing. It was the most humiliating moment of my life. She turned to me, her expression deadly serious. "I'm telling you this, Ramona, because I need you to understand. My absolute deepest fear, the thing that gives me a cold sweat just thinking about it, is having someone I love use my vulnerabilities as a punchline for other people. To be made small for a laugh." I pulled her close, horrified that she'd ever felt that way. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I would never, ever, you're safe with me." And I meant it. In that moment, I meant it more than anything I'd ever said, which makes what I did next so much worse. The party was in full swing. Music was pulsing from the speakers, people were crowded into our small living room, and the air was thick with laughter and the smell of takeout pizza. It was exactly the kind of chaotic, vibrant scene I lived for. My friend Zoe was holding court by the kitchen island, telling a story about her disastrous hinge date, her impeccable comedic timing landing every punchline. The group around her was roaring. Another friend, Sam, followed up with a self-deprecating story about getting fired from his summer job in college. It was a competition, a friendly but fierce battle for the best story, the biggest laugh. And I felt that familiar itch, the pressure building in my chest. I was the host, the co-star of the evening. I needed to contribute. I needed to shine. My mind started flipping through my catalog of anecdotes. There was the story about our vacation mishap, but I'd told that one before. The one about the work presentation, but it was too niche. Then, like a serpent uncoiling in my brain, the idea presented itself. Amara's story. A little red light started flashing in the back of my mind. No, don't you dare, Ramona. Not that one. It was the voice of reason, the voice that sounded a lot like Amara's quiet sincerity. But then I looked at the faces of my friends, flushed with wine and good humor, waiting for the next hit of comedy. I saw the social currency being exchanged, and my account was running low. The desire to be clever, to be the center of that warm, adoring attention, was a physical craving. It drowned out the warning bell. It was just a story. It was a cute story, I told myself. It was endearing. She'd probably laugh too, eventually. Oh my God, guys, speaking of childhood trauma, I announced, pitching my voice to carry over the music. The conversation lulled as heads turned toward me. I had the stage. You think that's bad? You have to hear about little Amara. I saw Amara across the room, her smile faltering slightly as she registered my words. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. A final, silent plea. I ignored it. I launched into the story. I set the scene, the stuffy elementary school classroom, the well-meaning but clueless teacher. I described the poem, heavy with S-words. And then I did the unforgivable. I did the voice. That lispy, hissing S sound she had described to me in the sacred confidence of our darkened living room. I performed her deepest humiliation for a room full of tipsy acquaintances. So the teacher calls on Amara the th-snake, I said, drawing out the C sound with a theatrical lisp, and the whole class just starts hissing. I mimed the snake-like sound, and that's what broke them. The room exploded. It wasn't just laughter, it was a wave of howling, shrieking hysterics. Zoe was doubled over, clutching her stomach. Sam was wiping tears from his eyes. For a glorious, intoxicating 30 seconds, I was the funniest person in the world. The warmth of their approval washed over me, and I felt brilliant, adored, and utterly in control. Then, through the din, I looked for Amara, expecting to see her rolling her eyes, maybe trying to hide a reluctant smile. But that's not what I saw. She was standing by the bookshelf, a half-empty cup in her hand. Her face was completely white, devoid of all expression. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was a terrifying, hollow blankness. She looked like a stranger, someone I had never met. The laughter around me started to sound harsh and distant, like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel. And in the dead center of that tunnel was Amara's face, shattered. The laughter died down in awkward little waves. People were starting to follow my gaze, their amused smiles faltering as they took in the scene by the bookshelf. The air in the room, so full of energy moments before, suddenly felt thick and heavy. The clink of ice in someone's glass sounded like a gunshot. Amara didn't move. She just stood there, holding her cup, her knuckles white. She wasn't looking at me with anger. It was worse. She was looking through me, as if I were a ghost, a bad memory she was trying to forget. The silence stretched on, becoming unbearable. Finally, she lowered her gaze from the wall and let it land on me. Her voice, when it came, was so quiet that the whole room seemed to lean in to hear it. It was flat, devoid of emotion, a voice I had never heard before. "You did it, Ramona," she said, her words dropping like stones into the dead quiet. "You finally did it." And that was it. No screaming, no crying, no scene. She calmly placed her cup on the bookshelf, turned, and walked toward the door. She picked up her jacket from the hook and her purse from the small entryway table. Her movements were fluid and deliberate, like someone who had rehearsed this exact exit in their mind 1,000 times. She didn't look back. Not at me, not at our friends, not at the life she was leaving behind. The click of the door latch shutting behind her was the loudest sound I had ever heard. For a moment, nobody moved. We were all frozen, a tableau of a party that had just died. Then, the social contract reasserted itself with brutal, awkward efficiency. Zoe was the first to break, suddenly finding something fascinating on her phone. "Wow, it's late," she muttered to no one in particular. Sam cleared his throat. "Yeah, I should probably head out, early morning." One by one, the people I had tried so hard to entertain started making their excuses. They avoided my eyes, offering mumbled goodbyes to the floor as they grabbed their things and slipped out the door Amara had just used. The exodus was quiet, shameful, and unbelievably fast. Within 5 minutes, the crowded, vibrant apartment was empty. Empty, except for me, standing alone in the middle of the room, the echo of their laughter still ringing in my ears like a curse. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent cycling through frantic hope and stomach-churning dread, I began my pathetic damage control tour. I sent Amara a string of increasingly incoherent texts, each one a new attempt at minimizing the catastrophe. "Morning, babe. Hope you slept okay. I feel awful. Let's talk. Okay, I know you're mad. It was a dumb joke. The wine was talking, not me. Everyone was roasting each other. It was just part of the vibe. I got carried away." The messages sat there unread. My justifications looked flimsy and pathetic even to me. My last resort was Zoe. She was the group's anchor, Amara's closest friend. If anyone could fix this, it was her. My hands were shaking as I dialed, rehearsing a speech about how sorry I was, how much I loved Amara. She picked up on the fourth ring. "What do you want, Ramona?" Her voice was clipped, stripped of all its usual warmth. "Zoe, thank God. Is she with you? Is she okay? Can I talk to her?" The words tumbled out of me, a frantic mess. There was a long pause. I heard her take a deep, weary sigh. "She's here," she said. "She showed up at my door last night, completely broken. She spent half the night crying and the other half just staring at the ceiling. She told me everything. Everything. It was a stupid story. A bad joke in poor taste. I'll apologize, I'll get on my knees, I'll do anything. She told me about the conversation you two had 6 months ago." Zoe cut in, her tone sharp as glass. "The one where she laid out her deepest, most painful childhood trauma for you and explicitly asked you never, ever to make it public. She said it was like giving you the only key to the most fragile room in her soul. And last night you took that key, unlocked the door, and invited a crowd in to point and laugh. At her own birthday party. The metaphor was so precise, so Amara, that it winded me. I know, it was horrible. I was drunk, I was trying to be funny, I wasn't thinking. That's the problem, isn't it?" Zoe's voice wasn't just angry anymore. It was filled with a calm, surgical disappointment that was so much worse. "You weren't thinking about her. You were only thinking about yourself, about how you looked to the rest of us. I was there, Ramona. I was laughing too, and I feel sick about it now. But I looked at you in that moment, soaking up the attention, and I didn't recognize the person who was supposed to love her more than anyone. Who does that?" I started to cry then, ugly, hiccuping sobs. "Please, Zoe, just tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I love her." Another pause, this one feeling like an eternity. "She needs space, Ramona, real space. And honestly, I think we all do too. She asked us to give her that and we're going to. Please don't call her again. And don't call me, or Sam, or anyone. We'll reach out if when she's ready." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the screen gone dark. Don't call me, or Sam, or anyone. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a decree. A coordinated wall of silence. My thumb, acting on pure instinct, scrolled to Sam's name and pressed call. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. Blocked. The full weight of it crashed down on me. Amara hadn't just left, she had deployed a scorched earth strategy. She had gone straight to our social support system, our shared circle of friends, and she had told them the whole, unvarnished truth. She had shown them the wound, and then she had shown them the knife, still with my fingerprints all over it. She hadn't just walked away from me. She had methodically, efficiently, and with devastating precision, excommunicated me from my own life. The very people whose approval I had so desperately craved last night were now a jury that had unanimously found me guilty. I was utterly, completely alone. Days bled into a week. The apartment became a prison of my own making. Every object was a landmine of memory. The coffee mug she used every morning, the half-finished book on her nightstand, the ridiculously soft throw blanket she'd insisted we buy. I started packing her things into boxes, a desperate attempt to create some emotional distance, but it only made her absence feel more tangible, more permanent. That's when I found her tablet, tucked between the couch cushions. She must have forgotten it in her haste to leave. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I shouldn't. It was an invasion of privacy, another violation of trust on top of the ultimate one. But the desperate, clawing need to feel close to her, to find some clue, some explanation, overpowered any sense of decency I had left. Her passcode was our anniversary. Of course it was. I swiped through the home screen, my fingers feeling clumsy and foreign on the glass. I opened her notes app, not knowing what I was looking for. And there it was, a folder simply titled, Us. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked on it. Inside were a dozen different notes. One was a link to a cooking class she'd bookmarked, with a little note underneath. Surprise for RS birthday. Another was a list of dog names, a conversation we'd been having for months. But the one that made my stomach drop was titled, Italy 2024. I opened it. It was a full-blown itinerary. A meticulously planned, 10-day trip through Tuscany we had dreamed of taking next spring. She had researched train schedules, cross-referenced reviews for little family-run trattorias, and even embedded links to an Airbnb in Florence with a balcony she knew I'd love. She had mapped out a day trip to a vineyard, remembering I'd once said I wanted to see how Chianti was made. She'd added a note, make sure to book the tour with the sunset tasting. Ramona would love the light. This wasn't a casual fantasy. This was a plan, a tangible, researched, deeply thoughtful blueprint for a future I had just incinerated. Tucked at the bottom of the note was a link to a real estate website. It led to the listing for a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood we'd talked about moving to, the one with the big park for the dog we were going to get. These weren't the digital breadcrumbs of someone planning an exit. This was the architecture of a shared life. A life she was actively, lovingly building right up until the moment I stood up at her party and blew it all to hell for a 3-minute standing ovation from a room full of people who wouldn't even take my calls now. The tablet slipped from my hands and clattered onto the floor. I just sat there on the rug, surrounded by the wreckage of a future I hadn't even realized was being so carefully built, and I howled. It's been 3 weeks. The boxes of Amara's things are stacked against the wall, a cardboard monument to my failure. The silence in the apartment is no longer just quiet. It's a presence, a heavy blanket that suffocates me. I've stopped trying to call our friends. The wall of silence is absolute. My world has shrunk to the size of my phone screen. I deleted my own social media accounts in a fit of shame, but I couldn't stay away. I created a new, anonymous Instagram account with a generic flower profile picture and no followers. A ghost account. My only purpose now is to watch the life I torched burn from a safe distance. I spend my nights scrolling, a digital ghoul haunting the edges of a party I can no longer attend. I check Zoe's page a dozen times an hour. Sam's, everyone's, I'm looking for her, for any sign of Amara. Last night I found one. Zoe posted a photo. It was a group shot, taken at a bonfire on the beach. All of them were there, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. And in the center of the group, tucked under Zoe's arm, was Amara. She wasn't smiling, not really. Her expression was tired, a little fragile around the edges, but she was calm. Her eyes weren't hollow anymore. She was looking at the fire, a small, peaceful smile playing on her lips. She looked like she was healing. The caption Zoe wrote was a gut punch. Some things are non-negotiable. Family is forever. I stared at the photo until the pixels blurred through my tears. Every like, every comment from a friend saying, "So glad to see you all together," or sending so much love, felt like a fresh stab. They were closing ranks, forming a protective circle around her, and leaving me on the outside. I was the threat they were protecting her from. I won. I got the laugh I wanted so badly. I was the star of the party for a few fleeting, glorious moments. Now they have a bonfire and family and healing. And I have an empty apartment, a ghost account, and the endless, sickening echo of my own joke. The punchline, it turns out, was me.